Final ending of the deal, part 1 down below. Both of the ladies gave me enormous embraces the next morning. After breakfast, Myra dropped Tilly off at school. I made use of the time to begin looking for a counselor. I required assistance. I had made a few calls by the time Myra returned, stating that I needed assistance. Myra smiled at me, first very broadly and then very seriously. She led me to the couch and said, Bart, can we talk about something for a moment? We sat down. After giving her a brief glance, I nodded, assuming I understood what she was trying to say. It's okay, Myra, I replied. I get it, last night was scary. With Tilly here, it's not great if I wake up screaming. I'll find somewhere else. Her hand slid onto mine as her eyes widened, a look of dread flickering across her cheeks. She sighed and continued, No, Bart, that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Bart, I don't know how to say this, but I just need to. Myra's expression caught my attention. It was both incredibly beautiful and confusing. Myra shouted out, Bart, I'm in love with you. Talk about having unexpected information hit you like a ton of bricks. As a foolish fool, I said, sorry. She said it again, more subtly this time, blushing a little. I said I'm in love with you. I have been for a long time. She gave me a weak grin and scanned my face for my thoughts as I sat back. Myra remarked to me, sorry Bart, but I can't hold it in anymore, as I tried to digest her words. When I heard you were in the hospital, I freaked out. I couldn't get there fast enough. I felt so guilty blowing up at you, telling myself I wouldn't say anything to you about how I really felt, but you almost died. Your wife and best friend just screwed you over, and when you got out, you came here. So I felt I didn't need to say anything because you were here with Tilly and me. I thought you would pick up on it sooner or later. But Myra, why? Why are you telling me? What brought it on? I inquired. She laughed a little, but with a hint of sadness mixed in, she said, You stupid lump. Last night happened, you were in pain. It broke my heart to see you like that, but I got to be there for you, falling asleep in my arms. I want to think I was able to lessen your burden. I ached for you, I just can't. Bart, I don't want to hold it in anymore. Myra's gaze moved across to me. She tilted her head to the side and asked, as to why it's always been you. Haven't you ever noticed that I don't date? I said, cocking my head slightly to the side in answer. Yeah, but I always assumed that it was because of Tilly. I responded. With hesitation, Myra answered, that's part of it. But Bart, simply I could never find anyone who could hold a candle against you. I questioned, tilting my head to the side. Myra grinned. Observe, she murmured. When you first met Tilly, you were kind and made her feel special by helping her with her homework or reading to her. Tilly has never met her father, but she views you as a father figure. Take a look at how she climbed in with you last night because she knew you were in pain. From the moment I started working with you, you never treated me differently than anyone else. Instead, you spent your time explaining everything. But Myra, I said, staring. She interrupted, raising a hand. You attempted to take it all on yourself last week when everything was thrown at us. You're an amazing man, Bartholomew Other. You didn't yell or scream. You didn't treat me cruelly when I threw a tantrum or when I slapped you. Myra flushed. That is just one of the many reasons I adore you. And I'm going to take you up and give you so much love that this time next month you won't even remember that woman's name if Kelly is foolish enough to throw you away. She leaned over and kissed me, and I kissed her back, throwing my arms around her, in a matter of seconds. Bart, will you take me? Shall I become your woman? With a seductive smile on her face, Myra questioned her. One of the best women I had ever met had just propositioned me. If I was really honest with myself, I would admit that I had fantasized about her in the past and wondered what she looked like without makeup. Now I had the chance to find out, but things were moving quickly. I knew Kelly and I would never be in a relationship again. The news that Myra was in love with me was important because it made me feel like I wasn't such a loser, but I was also afraid it would be a rebound. Myra took my hand and led us to her bedroom, seeming to understand my inner turmoil, but saying nothing as she did so. My manhood responded to each step we took, growing more and more wantful until, at last, as we entered the bedroom, she turned to kiss me and let her body melt into mine. After a few minutes of our lips meeting and our arms entwined, I gently moved my hands down her sides to let her know how much I cared. When our lips parted, she looked me in the eyes and shuddered with pleasure, burning desire obvious. She laughed and formed another stance as I broke off the kiss and stood back, examining her with one outstretched arm in hers. As you seem to see, she nibbled her lower lip sensually and murmured, Oh yeah, in a big way. Myra, you truly are breathtakingly lovely. Myra realized right away that I truly meant it and grinned widely. I have never seen a more beautiful woman than you. After we kissed for a few more minutes, Myra helped undress me, lifting my shirt without snagging on the bandages around my wrist, and she looked at my chest and stomach with a possessive glow. I wasn't a Greek god, but I had maintained a healthy weight over the years, so yeah, I had a dad bod, but I will admit that I thought it looked decent, judging from the looks Myra was giving me. Your body is amazing. Myra gazed at me beseech, Bart, and murmured, breathlessly, as our lips parted again. I want you inside of me. No, I need you to finish undressing me. Please. I reached around with a smile. I beg you, my darling, to take me as yours and make me your woman so that I can claim you as mine. I climbed over her body, blotting my face on the sheets, and took up position at her door. Myra, are you sure? I mean, I am technically still married. We can stop, I replied. As much as I hated to, I had to tell Myra what was going on. Yes, baby, I have never wanted anything more in my life. So take me, but take me slowly. I haven't had someone there in years, she replied. I thought my love for Kelly would burn brightly forever, but after her betrayal, it felt like a feeble reflection of the love I saw in Myra's eyes when we joined and made love. The only thing that matched Myra's admiring stare were the pleasure our bodies were providing to one another. It felt like an hour at a time. As we both felt relief, time itself ceased to exist. As we both recovered, Myra laid her head on my chest and I inquired, was that wise, Myra? Are you on the pill? She looked up at me and said, no, I'm not on the pill, but my period ended only a few days ago, so we should be safe. Bart, I know we're not that young, but neither are we that old. Would it be so bad if we had a baby in the future? Replied she. I grinned as I met the eyes of my new lover, a woman I had loved and cared for years as a close friend and colleague and who I was discovering I was falling in love with romantically minute by minute. No, it wouldn't be a bad thing, I answered. After that, we went to sleep, and while I was asleep, I dreamed the same dream as before. While Kelly and Roger slept together, my hopelessness returned. Abruptly, a stunning Myra entered the room, mending my wounds with her hands before taking me out of the room and away from the sight of sorrow and anxiety. The alarm went off and we woke up. I was wrapped in Myra's arms, sweating and trembling but not shouting. Myra looked worried as we dressed, and she brought me along when she picked Tilly up from school. I told her about the dream. It required several more weeks. Roger and Kelly, though, were both taken into custody after being detained. They had learned that the police had dropped the accusations against me and were now wishing to speak with them. In a hurry, they drove to Adelaide from Perth and were apprehended by Australian customs as they attempted to leave the nation. I must admit that over the 2 months it took for Western Australian police to get them back to Perth, my connection with Myra progressed tremendously. When I moved into her bedroom, which is now our bedroom, after that first night, I have to say that I felt like I was in my 20s once more. Almost every night, we made love. I cherished Myra's complete surrender to me. As we united, I could sense that my body, mind, and soul were being given to me. I believe it's clear that I had feelings for this woman. Myra was right, I realized after the cops had driven Roger and Kelly back to Perth. I could hardly remember getting close to Kelly, and I didn't want to hold on to those memories. Similar to me, Myra had only ever dated her boyfriend, who was unfaithful. As we got to know one another over that first week, Myra proudly showed me her assortment of toys that had satisfied her throughout the years. Since then, we've had a great time playing with those toys. Our passion making is never boring. After the dreadful two were returned to Perth, a month later, Myra and I appeared in court alongside Regan as witnesses against Kelly and Roger. Even when I was testifying, Roger never gave me a straight glance. In the end, he received a 15-year sentence. Kelly, nevertheless, kept staring at me the entire time without once pausing. Roger was shown to be the mastermind behind everything during the court case. Kelly received a 20-year sentence, which stunned everyone since he was the one luring her in and encouraging the fraud. She was determined to have participated in the scam, but when accusations of mental cruelty were also made against her for what she had done to me, she was sentenced to an additional 5 years based on evidence from the covert cameras Kelly had set up for Roger. Not long after the verdict was rendered, the judge also approved our divorce. Kelly handed me with the divorce papers, and Regan made a notation of a split of our savings. Regan added that I had no intention of living in a place where such terrible things had happened, therefore I was willing to sell it and divide the earnings right away. Finally, Regan informed the court that I would be happy to handle Kelly's financial affairs as trustee until her sentence was served. Regan had to do a lot of wooing to get me to agree to it, but it also demonstrated my willingness to patch things up and effectively put a halt to Kelly's attorney's petty arguments, something they frequently do throughout a divorce. I was not to spend Kelly's money, but I could use them in addition to whatever money I put down in a place. Roger and Kelly were ordered to begin serving their sentences right away by the courts. Additionally, Kelly's attorney requested in her closing remarks following the decision that I spend an hour with her prior to her being transported to jail. I reluctantly agreed, feeling as though the whole court was staring at me. As soon as the court was gone, Kelly was brought into the interview room still wearing her court attire. Although the table was locked down and the chair legs had changed to prevent them from being tossed, the room was properly furnished. Kelly's shoulders slumped as she sat down, not meeting my gaze as she had in the courtroom, but looking defeated and sad, just like I had felt at her betrayal. Her jail guard informed us that she would be outdoors as soon as we were finished. She wasn't in a rush. We sat for a few minutes without saying anything to each other. Since Kelly gave me instructions that I ultimately tried to follow, it was the first time the two of us had been in a room together. With a hushed "I'm sorry, Bart," she turned to face her hands. The fact that she was the first to speak and that her first remarks were an apology caught me off guard. The final remarks made were unmistakably at the other extreme. "Are you Kelly?" I inquired, allowing a hint of resentment to permeate my voice. She raised her gaze to mine, about to cry but holding back. I started to say, "Yes, Bart, I am so sorry," to which she replied with the traditional hand up and pause. I waited and didn't say anything. Kelly beseeched, "Please, Bart, let me finish this so you can chastise me." I pushed back against the chair and gave her a hand signal to go on. "Thank you," she replied apologetically, meeting my gaze for the first time since coming into the room. "Believe it or not, Bart, I am sorry. I don't know what happened to me. For so many years, I loved you. I still do, even though I did such horrible things. But what is worse than that is that I knew how much you loved me. You were the perfect husband and lover, but one day I woke up, feeling, I don't know, lost." She turned her head away from me, returned her gaze to her hands, and spoke again. "So you know, perhaps a few weeks after first feeling lost, things started spiraling out of control. I was getting agitated towards you because you still loved me even though I felt wrong. Roger was round working with you on that damned project when he noticed something was off with me." She began to shake her hands. "I don't think you ever knew, but Roger was always jealous of your ability to lead. He always felt he was second fiddle to you, which irked him. He came up with the idea of getting a client to pay a whole lot of money for something that never happened and pretend you were stealing it from the company. It took about another month before the affair started. Roger was insistent. He knew all the right buttons to push. I still loved you, but he knew how to play on my insecurities, getting me into bed. After that, he used my guilt to carry out his plan. To my regret, we both plotted to harm you and started the whole thing. We made sure you were destroyed one little step at a time, opening the new bank account in your name. We both knew you loved and trusted without question. By the time the dust settled, Roger figured we could set up in a different country, and if they ever found out, we'd be beyond reach with you in jail, his money, our savings, and the money we stole," Kelly said, shaking her head in shock at her own words. "And in the interim," I murmured, attempting to conceal my rage, "neither of you gave a damn that you utterly destroyed me in the process." "Yes, at first, I didn't want to, but Roger was incessant," she said with a sorrowful nod. "He gradually broke me down till I was willing, yet apprehensive. You had to be so damaged that you wouldn't question anything for the plan to work." "You almost succeeded," I replied. "If it wasn't for Detective Roundlight and Myra, you might very well have gotten away with it." After a silence, Kelly requested in a low voice, "Can I see them?" With understanding, I gently placed my arms on the table with my palms facing up. I sat there impassively, on the outside, but inside I was fighting a range of emotions, from rage to shame, quickly flashing through my mind. What upset me somewhat was that there was even a little love there even after everything this woman put me through, but it galled me to admit it. I guess I wasn't successful in masking the emotion, as Kelly looked up at me and stiffened. Kelly gasped, and tears began to flow as she looked at my scars. She started to reach out, then pulled her hands back. "I'm sorry, Bart. I am so sorry. I am ashamed that I drove you to try and take your own life. She stopped. "I'm going to accept the 20 years without appeal. I deserve this after what I did to you." Glad that she would do time without question, I nodded. She turned to face me again. "Bart," Kelly caught my eye, "so that you know, you were never a bad lover. You are amazing compared to Roger. He thought he was amazing, but he was next to useless in bed. It was all about him, and he never took time to pleasure me as you did. I have no excuse for what I did to you that last morning." I was wrong. We were silent for a moment. Inquiringly, "So you and Myra?" she posed. I cautiously answered, "Yeah." She offered a meek little grin. My now ex-wife remarked matter-of-factly, "Good, she's loved you for years, you know." "Well, I recently found out," I answered. Her next sentence astonished me with the intensity and pain in her voice. "My now ex-wife told me sadly, I know I have no right to advise you on anything. But that woman loves you, and unlike me, she would never betray you. She's wanted you for years and never once made a move to try and seduce you. It failed the very first time I was tested. She is everything that I'm not." Big fat tears were streaming from her eyes, but she kept looking at me. "Kelly, I said, a little lost for words. "Don't worry," she assured me while using her sleeve to wipe away her tears. "I'll be fine. I've agreed to your terms. I was surprised you were so generous to look after my money while in prison. You're a better man than I ever imagined." I breathed deeply. "Kelly, I loved you once, more than I think you ever knew. If you had talked to me about your feelings, perhaps we would have avoided everything. But I'm trying hard to get over everything you did to me. But to let you know, I'm holding a lot of anger even now. I want to scream at you. I want to choke the life from you for what you said to me. But I can't, Kelly. I was the one who decided to try and take my own life. I am the one that has to live with that." Neither of us said anything for a moment. Kelly remarked, "Bart," as we exchanged another glance. "I am so very sorry for what I did to you. You deserve more from me, and I share just as much blame for pushing you, even more than you if we are honest with each other. I will forever be ashamed. I got to see the letter you wrote, and you were right that I will burn for what I did. But I do thank God that you're alive." I grit my teeth for a moment. My mind was still racing with strong emotions. Now, how could Kelly have said those things? How could she take ownership of the situation and attempt to take away the hurt and rage I was clinging to? I shifted the topic since it wasn't fair. I tried, failing miserably, to hide my feelings as I continued. "I proposed to look after your money out of respect for our years together. You will have enough to start again when you get out if you want. I'll probably be in my 60s, then hopefully it will be enough to retire, Kelly said, bitterly chuckling as she saw through my poorly veiled attempt to hide. 60 isn't that old, I replied. Keep yourself together on the inside, and you'll be going strong into your 80s. We talked about her preferred method of communication regarding her cash for a few more minutes. It helped to calm us down a bit. However, I felt she was itching to move on to the next subject. She questioned, a little hesitant, have you spoken with Grace? I thought for a moment. Grace pretty much told me where to go, that I was dead to her, and took the lies that you and your lover fed her as gospel. It was that conversation that broke me. Kelly recoiled at the pained and sorrowful expression in my eyes as I glanced at her. I stopped and turned around abruptly so Kelly wouldn't see me cry. Kelly never asked if I was innocent. She never gave me the benefit of the doubt. She just threw me out without a second glance. Kelly never asked me if I was innocent. If I had looked back while I was crying, I would have seen Kelly crying too. What I couldn't say, she knew. I moved forward, my back to Kelly. Kelly had been trying to wipe her tears when I turned around and wiped my face on my sleeve, saying, when I was in the hospital, Myra tried to contact her, but nothing. I'm sorry, Bart, Kelly flinched. A lot of that was what Roger and I orchestrated. To my eternal disgrace, it was planned that we would have Grace turn against you. I gave a nod. As Kelly acknowledged her behavior and hung her head in shame, she noticed the glint of rage in my eyes. She knew she had ruined my relationship with my kid, and I was about to yell at her for it. Kelly had just acknowledged it candidly. If it helps you feel better, Kelly sadly uttered. Kelly abruptly stopped talking with sadness in her voice and replaced it with an insistent voice. Grace has thrown me out of her life, too. I have not been told off that much since I was a child, but I know I deserve that and more. Bart, Kelly stated, our little girl needs you. She's scared and lashing out at everyone. Right now, she and John are fighting over everything and anything, and you know that's not them. Softly, Kelly continued, I'm worried about her. This is my fault, but I can't fix it. I know she feels guilty about how she treated you, but that you're not talking to her after everything makes it worse. Kelly paused for a while. Kelly stopped and glanced back at me while she kept wringing her hands. Bart, I know I have no right to request anything of you, but could you find it in yourself to forgive Grace? Our daughter needs at least one of her parents. I know now that even if I was not going to prison for a long time, my guilt at what I have done to you as well as turning Grace against you would have eaten me alive for the next few years, and she would have still hated me in the end. Kelly sighed. You should be the one to pick her up. This method is preferable. I'm not sure what she would have done if you had passed away. Please, Bart, take care of our daughter at least, my now ex-wife begged me. Kelly, I gasped and tried to think of something to say. It's difficult to do what you're asking, because you hurt me deeply, but you were my wife, not my biological daughter. It hurt more than anything you could have done to me when Grace told me she didn't want to be around me ever again and that I was dead to her, not even a day after you had urged me to go die. I wish I could go back to her, but I'm not sure how I can move past the hurt caused by what our daughter and my family did. Kelly. Kelly nodded, understanding the sorrow of being disowned because she was going through it herself, and saying, I understand, sadly acknowledging that I was trying but that there was a lot for me to overcome. Look, Kelly, for what it's worth, I'm going to work hard at trying not to hate you, I groaned, turning to face my ex-wife. Even if I have expert assistance, it still takes a lot of my inner strength to not yell and curse at you. Furthermore, I won't guarantee Grace. However, I will think about speaking with her shortly. There wasn't much else to say, so Kelly got up. She looked devastated. Over this chat, Kelly appeared to have aged years. Bart, I apologize again for all I did to you, even though I know it's not worth squat to you right now. I know I can never make up for it, and I have no justification. Kelly sniffed again, her age lines and wrinkles now blatantly visible, then looked at me, her wrinkles and lines saying, you may not believe me, but I still and will always love you. I will serve my time, and while I may never have it, I will hope that one day you can forgive me. Although I may not have noticed it for long, I still do. We waited awkwardly for a moment, and then Kelly, with her jail escort opening the door after she had stepped over to knock, hesitated and glanced back at me. Bart, adore Myra. Give her the love I so carelessly tossed away. Keep your head up and have a good life. There are loving individuals all around you. Never forget that, even in your lowest points, there is always someone who is willing to put you back on your feet. I am proud of you, Bart, but I forgot about it. You're starting to feel like yourself again. Goodbye, my lovely partner. I will always remember you, Kelly muttered bitterly as she left. And she left the room. I thought about what had happened. Kelly had taken ownership of her actions and her sentencing to prison. There had been no screaming. When it was my turn to leave the room, I noticed a path of tiny drips on the tile floor going in the direction that Kelly had gone. After a moment of lamenting what was no longer, I turned and walked the other way. I was escorted out of the secure area and away to the public gallery, where Myra was waiting for me. Myra looked beautiful, even on such a solemn occasion. Her blouse tried to hide her amazing assets, her skirt accentuated her curvaceous bottom, and her long blonde hair cascaded down her shoulders, down her back, and just above her waist. She kissed me tenderly and slid into my arms with ease. Has everything gone smoothly? May I ask? She inquired. Yes, I answered. It was unexpected. I anticipated receiving a ton of blame and justifications. However, she accepted a large portion of the blame and surprised me with her level of regret. What are your thoughts on that? Myra asked. Holding Myra, I pondered for a while before saying, to be honest, I still feel a lot of resentment toward Roger and her. However, I also feel bad for her. Unlike Roger, she is aware that she ruined her entire life and that she is currently paying for it. Grace has apparently allegedly cut Kelly out of her life as a result of what she done. After a little pause, Myra nodded and said, about that. After giving me a brief glance, she said, John and Grace are here. John approached me when you were inside with Kelly and said they would be in the cafe across the street for the next few hours if you wanted to chat. He is aware of your anger. She is quite eager to meet you, even though it seems like they have been fighting a lot over how Grace handled you. I inhaled deeply and turned to face my sweetheart. Don't you think I ought to speak with her? I inquired. I do, my love, Myra nodded. I am unable to ease the grief that you carry in your soul. Grace alone is able to. But I will accompany you if that is helpful. For as long as you need me, I will stay by your side. Additionally, she gave me a smile. I'll still rip her eyeballs out if you need Mama Bear to come out. Bart, I adore you. She said things as if she were commanding the universe to obey me. I love you too, Myra, I said as I moved in to kiss her. Myra's eyes widened at my first public declaration of love for her. We received a few glances from passers-by, including lawyers, judges, and criminals, but I didn't care because Myra was the only person I could see at that moment. I said, let's go then, and we crossed the street holding hands. Myra and I entered the cafe and saw my daughter and her fiancé right away. Grace was torn between throwing herself down and hugging me, so I let her try the latter. I opened my arms and let her slide in against me, and a few moments later, I felt my shirt get wet as she started crying. For a few minutes, she kept saying, I'm sorry, Daddy, and I kept staring at Myra and John, not sure where to look. Eventually, after a few minutes, I pushed her off of me and we sat down. I thought I'd start things off by getting us each a drink and a small snack. I just had a conversation with your mom, I muttered. I heard, Daddy, I'm sorry, it was just, Grace said with a shrug. It was my turn, so I raised my hand. Gracie, I know you're sorry, your mother gave me a detailed explanation, but you should know that what you said to me hurt, much more than anything I have ever felt before, and that I thought there was no way out at that point. Regardless of the situation, one of the few people I thought would at least give me some thought ignored me and threw me out. What hurt the most, though, was that you never once inquired as to my innocence. Grace turned a deep scarlet, her shame evident on her countenance. Daddy, she straightened her shoulders. No, I need to say this, she repeated to herself more than to anyone else. John didn't say anything, but he gave her a supportive hand squeeze. I apologize, Dad. I should have given you more time to react and allowed you to clarify, but I didn't. Mom, with Roger's help, kept telling me how deceitful you had been. I can't lay the blame for my actions at your feet. They told me how much you had screwed up, how you were going to jail, how you were having an affair, she said, casting a sidelong glance at Myra. They had strong appeal. I was so agitated by the time you called that I regret saying a lot of things. John nodded, and I figured that was why they'd fought so much about it. Dad, I assumed it was all a ruse when Myra left the notes about you in the hospital. Grace continued to glance at Myra and then at me. They said that you were just after attention since Myra was a part of your scheme. I mean, Mom and Roger were still trash-talking you, and Myra was the one you were in cahoots with. Is it true, Dad? Did you make an effort to? The last portion was beyond her. It was beyond all of us to say. I gave a nod and swallowed, revealing my scars to her by lifting my wrists. I apologize, Gracie. It's true that I was in a dark place and couldn't see a way out. I admit that when I was at my lowest, I drank a lot and did something I regret. I had to show my daughter what she had inspired me to do, I continued, swallowing my words gently. Grace sobbed into her hands at my admission, and Myra sank into my side, my emotions threatening to burst along with Grace's. John gazed at us, and for a few moments no one said anything. John looked at us and grinned, saying, I do not mean to brush over the seriousness, but I'd like to give Grace a break and compose herself. Can I presume that anything positive came out of everything, though? He gestured to Myra and me cuddling. Grace raised her head, and then her eyes widened. You and Myra, Dad? She questioned inquiringly. Yes, I said, nodding, but felt compelled to clarify that it wasn't an affair as your mother had said. I didn't ever betray your mother. In the hospital, Myra was not going to leave me when I woke up. Myra, you are unaware of this, briefly joined Roger and your mother in their madness. Myra blushed but put her arms around my waist and kissed me on the lips as we made up. It was then that I realized just how much this woman loves me. John grinned, and Grace gave us a wide-eyed look before seeming to come into her own. Thank you, she said to Myra. Thank you for picking up my dad and being there for him when I had a serious case of the stupids. Myra laughed, which diffused some of the tension, and we talked for the next few hours, at times discussing our ordeal as a group, at times from the perspective of each individual, and at one point, I even made Grace switch positions with Myra so my daughter could embrace me. While Grace and I worked at it, gradually mending our father-daughter connection, I would want to say that our meeting healed all the wounds between us, but it took months before we felt open enough to talk to each other without feeling like we were treading carefully. Grace even attended a few of my counseling sessions. My therapist assisted us in resolving some of the gaps and problems that remained unresolved after our first meeting at the cafe. One of the difficult conversations was when I urged Grace to keep her mother in her life. Yes, Kelly had been a cunning and manipulative lady. She was still her mother even if she was suffering the price. As long as I accompanied her on our initial meeting, she agreed to go. It was a challenging meeting. There was a lot of hurt between the three of us, so not much was said, but Grace tried, and Kelly wrote to me the following week to express her gratitude that I had persuaded her. After everything went down, I proposed to Myra 6 months later. We had dinner as a family, and I proposed. I let out a bark of laughter as John grinned and repeated the phrase I had given him, while Tilly and Grace applauded and told me it was about time. Grace and John got married soon after. Myra went to see Kelly in prison with my permission, asking if she would allow her to assume the role of mother of the bride. Kelly reportedly sobbed but granted authorization. As a flower girl, Tilly was stunning and called everyone my second daughter. I became dad instead of Uncle Bart after that. I took Grace down the aisle and gave her away to a very proud husband after we had mended our relationship. She cuddled up to me during our father-daughter dance, and I felt her mumble a prayer of gratitude. I felt the final remnants of my reluctance to be around Grace go that night. Grace even went so far as to send Kelly a letter and a set of pictures as gratitude for allowing Myra to take over for her. Kelly, as far as I can tell, retains them on her cell wall. Regan worked out a big employment settlement for both Myra and myself as the criminal case involving Roger and Kelly came to an end. Clarence stood his ground for some time, insisting he had done nothing wrong, but a week prior to our court date, he made an offer that Regan turned down. It was demeaning and low. 2 days prior to the court date, he extended another offer, to which Regan responded. Consequently, Myra received a substantial 6-figure settlement, while I received a respectable 7-figure compensation. Our payment, as a multi-million-dollar engineering company, paled in comparison to the potential damages incurred from a public litigation. But, by the time I worked there, rumors had already started to circulate, and Clarence's earnings suffered greatly until he retired and sold the business for less than 30% of its original value. Myra and I founded our own engineering consulting business with the proceeds from our settlements. We would contribute our administrative and engineering know-how. In less than half a year, we had 5 employees traveling the nation and assisting with significant engineering projects. The unexpected part was that Peter Pembroke was among our very first customers. He apologized to Myra and me while taking us out to supper. After the facts were revealed, he acknowledged that we had all been duped and acknowledged that the project would have failed if my engineering expertise hadn't been used to coordinate the delivery. After that, whether or not we were working on their projects, Myra and I would receive invitations to any major Pembroke event each year. Peter wished to make apologies. He was a kind man put in a difficult circumstance. We also bought a much larger property not too far down the road with a fantastic view of Kings Park, and sold Myra's modest cottage. We spent more than 2 years renovating the property, which had 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms in the past. It was enjoyable. We only took time out for wedding festivities, a few family vacations, and the birth of Tilly's younger brother, Grace. Myra was my rock and was there for me whenever I needed her, even though my life had improved and I occasionally still had nightmares. Now, more than 10 years later, Byron was an intelligent 10-year-old. Following in Aunt Regan's footsteps, Tilly was pursuing a legal education at university. And on that leisurely Saturday afternoon, Byron was playing Xbox with my 7-year-old grandson Bruce while Grace and John were sitting with us on our front terrace, which overlooked Kings Park. They were also attempting to avoid my 5-year-old granddaughter Hope when Grace brought up her mother. With a casual yet circumspect tone, she said, "Dad, I got a letter from Mom this week." Although discussing Kelly wasn't frowned upon in the household, people tended to tread carefully when they brought her up. Over the years, Kelly had written me a few letters and I had even paid her a few visits. I was aware that she was receiving therapy and that she belonged to a small prison community. She was regarded as a model prisoner, despite the fact that she still had 8 years left on her sentence. I said, "What did she have to say?" Then there was silence. Among other things, she let me know that she got the news that Roger was released last month, Grace added. I took a silent sip of my Coke and Kraken. "Last month." Worried, I asked. Suddenly, I felt Myra's hand on mine. "Did she say anything else?" Grace was asked by Myra. Grace gave a nod. Indeed, she did mention that he paid her a visit. His mother claims he didn't appear well. If the letter was accurate, Roger's inner life was everything but tranquil. I'll go see her next week to see what transpired, but she mentioned that it wasn't a pleasant conversation with him. After we spoke about it for a few more minutes, I excused myself and gave David Roundlight a call. With time, he had become into a buddy. David was now in charge of a team investigating serious crimes and had resolved several intricate cases that attracted a lot of media attention. "Bart, my friend, how are you doing? He answered my call with a pleasant "How's your beautiful wife?" In spite of myself, I smiled. "Myra is great." I hesitated, saying, "David, I recently learned that Roger was freed." I sensed David lose his upbeat demeanor. "Yes, yesterday I received the report. Next week when we go bowling, I was going to tell you," he stated. Tuesday night bowling was something David and I did together. It appears from the story that he has been given permission to relocate to Adelaide. It seems that he has secured employment with a tiny company located there. The panel asked him about you and whether he planned to have any contact during his probation interview. He threatened to burn in hell for destroying his life, but he realized he had to go because no one would hire him with his background in Western Australia. I sighed, and Peter went on. The report mentions that he had a rough internal existence. He engaged in multiple battles, losing the most of them. Ultimately, he turned to books to avoid being in the way of most inmates. If that is your concern, I don't think you will have any problems with him. I appreciate it, David, that was my worry. I'll let you know if I do hear from him, I answered, letting go of a breath I was unaware I was holding. For a few minutes, we talked about bowling and the impending barbecue, and then I returned to the table. Myra gave me a look as I sat down. "David?" she inquired. I gave a nod. He affirmed that Roger has moved to Adelaide and is no longer there. He obviously despises my insides, though. It's true that we feel the same way. I informed the gathered family. Although I was with my family and they made sure I felt supported, the remainder of the afternoon was a little quieter. I woke up that night from my first nightmare in years, sweating and screaming. Roger had tied us all up in it when he had come in the night. He threatened to shoot Myra, Tilly, and Byron if I didn't use the straight razor on myself while he had a gun to our heads. I was going to do what I had done before when I woke up screaming, having picked up the razor. Myra was instantly wide awake. She was trying to calm me down, but I was sweating like a swine and I couldn't stop massaging my wrists. Myra contacted my therapist at 2 in the morning without asking, and she was really kind to accept the call. But that's the reason we gave him such a large payment. Myra sobbed and clung to me tightly as I told her about the dream. Even though my wife was unhappy, I felt better just talking it through. As I explained the dream to my therapist, she listened and observed that it was probably brought on by hearing about Roger's release and my concern about all that had happened to me more than 13 years prior. I thanked him for coming to pick me up so early in the morning, and we scheduled a follow-up visit. Myra checked on Byron as we were getting comfortable again, and to our surprise, he was still asleep. After hearing us on the phone, Tilly went back to bed after waking up and telling her mother to tell me she loved me. Myra curled up across my chest as soon as I lay down after using the restroom. I was roused by her ever-impressive bust, and before I knew it, we were in a relationship. Just as heated as her body was, so was my urge to be connected to it. Myra's late 40s body still had the appropriate curves, and even though I was in my 50s now, my libido had slowed down a little. We made love for about 30 minutes until my last release, and then we got back in bed after a quick shower. "Do you really think there will be an issue with Roger?" Myra inquired, a little worried. "No, I don't," I answered. "I believe he will move out and leave us without speaking to him again. You are aware that we are protected even in the event that we did." I made a suggestion that my hunting gear was safely kept in our walk-in closet. Myra gave a grim nod. "Good, I'm sorry that you were offended by hearing about it, my love. Are you okay?" "Slightly," I answered. Regretfully, I believe that a shadow will always be present there. Though I don't think about those days as frequently as I used to, they will always be a part of who I am. The naked woman who loved me so much gave me a squeeze. But when I do think about those times, I tend to dwell on the beautiful blonde woman who swooped in and saved my life. Myra lifted her head and gave me a look. "I'm serious, my love," I said to her. At the time, I felt so hopeless that I believed ending everything was the only option. If you hadn't been there for me when I woke up, I might have done it once again. It is now clear to me that there is no recovery from this. To ignore it is to do no good. The best I can do is make every effort to surround myself with the people I love, to be reminded of all the things I have to be grateful for, and to talk to you when I need to in order to avoid finding myself back there. Myra gave a nod. "I love you, Bart," says she. "Myra, I love you too," I answered. We went to sleep after that, and although we didn't always live happily ever after, we did have good days and bad days. Indeed, there were arguments and clashes, as well as additional nightmares. Above all, though, I gained knowledge from it all because I had friends who welcomed me for who I was, family who supported me through good times and bad, and unwavering love from a lady who made it all possible. My comment: this is the ending to the morning story. You believe OP worked out his relationship. Do you believe there is anything wrong being too forgiving against the people who wronged him, especially his daughter? Comment down below, check out part 1 if you haven't, and I will see you tomorrow.